The one time that you can do this, if you're trying it yourself for the first time, my only recommendation is get some really good advice. Because if you try it the first time and you fail, you make one simple little mistake that the assessor's office will never tell you about, then you're going to cause a reassessment, and then you have to pay for it, and then your children have to pay for it, and you have to do it forever.
So thanks so much, Elijah, for coming and joining us on our YouTube channel. I want you guys to know I've known Elijah for quite a while, and we've been colleagues and friends. I love his family. We once went to one of his daughter's birthday parties, and I remember eating the donut from a string thing. It was such a blast. I really respect Elijah and his practice, and we've worked at some of the same firms before, and then we went solo, and Elijah's great. So I asked Elijah today to come and talk with us about Prop 19, and that comes up quite frequently, actually. A lot of clients ask me about that, and he and I were talking, and he goes, oh, I do some of that planning. And I thought, great, come on onto our channel and talk to us a little bit. So Elijah, please take it away. Tell us a little bit about your practice, and then maybe you can tell us a bit about Prop 19 and what are those options out there?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me today. I have known Ellen for many years, and she was one of my mentors when I first started my practice. And so thank you so much. She's fantastic. If you're watching this video, she is definitely an outstanding attorney. My practice is estate planning, and I do a little bit more tax work than some other attorneys do. I have an LLM, meaning a Master's of Law in Tax, and I'm a certified specialist. Much like Ellen, we have the same kind of background, but we have a different focus. And so some of my focus is on helping people protect property tax transfers. So in California, there was a law that was in effect for many years called Proposition 58. And this was a law that allowed parents to transfer a primary home plus a bunch of other real estate, maybe commercial, maybe rented, maybe vacation homes, to children without causing a reassessment or raising of property tax. How property tax is calculated is you have an assessed value, an assessment. So the tax records at the county assessment office, assessor's office, dictate how you calculate tax. And you take the assessment rate and you multiply it by a tax rate, generally about 1% plus some plus some additional amount. So between 1 to 1.2%. And that's your property tax. Every year, the property tax cannot go up more than 2% under another law called Proposition 13. So when there's a transfer between two different people who are not spouses, there is a required reassessment event. Reassessment means that the property tax will raise to fair market value on the date of the transfer, whether it's a sale, purchase, gift, transfer, forfeiture, whatever it is. When there is a transfer between two or more people, then there is a reassessment. There are some exceptions.
This reassessment, and what I've seen with my clients, it's immediate and it's painful. All of a sudden you get this, you owe a whole lot in taxes letter, and now you're paying it. So it's not like looking to the future. A lot of the other tax planning that we do, when you say, okay, when this person dies and when this person dies, no, this is an immediate painful tax. And that's why I think a lot of people are so curious about it.
There was a change. This law that we talked about, Proposition 58, that allowed parents to transfer property to children changed. It changed effective February 2021. And it was replaced by a law called Proposition 19. And we can discuss whether it was right or wrong for it to go through. I am of the opinion that it was a really sneaky measure, but whatever it is. So Proposition 19 changed the way that property transferred to children. You still can transfer between spouses. There is still a reassessment for other people, between other people, siblings, between friends, family. But between parents and children, there's no longer a reassessment exception except in one small way. If there's commercial property, vacation property, rental property, those are automatically reassessed. But if there's a primary home and the parent lives in the home up until the time of death and then transfer the home to the child, and within 1 year of the parent's death, the child moves into the home, then you receive a temporary, partial reduction in property tax. What I mean by temporary is as long as the child continues to live in the home, then you have the reduction. What I mean by partial is that you can only avoid up to $1 million of reassessed value. If the value raised is more than $1 million, then simply subtract $1 million. If the value of the property is less than $1 million right now, then you keep the current assessment because it's not going to raise more than $1 million. And so if the child continues to live in the home, then the property tax will either stay low or it won't rise as much as it does. Now, you might say, what happens if you move out? Does that mean you can rent the house? No. If you move out, property tax goes up to fair market value at that point, fast forwarded for Proposition 13. And so you just start paying big money. And this law actually causes a lot of people to sell. The motivation of this law was actually to make property sell faster. And so it actually makes it difficult for parents to give children homes and keep things in the family. We can talk about the likely causes or impacts over the next 20 years in a different video, but that's the state of the law today.
Yeah. And it caught a lot of people by surprise. And so folks came in and they were like, fix this for me. And I was like, there isn't really a fix. There is this very complicated fix.
Yeah, there is a complicated fix.
I don't do that. And so I thought, but you know what? Elijah can tell you about that complicated fix. So Elijah, do you mind diving into that and letting us know who might be eligible or who might be the right candidate for it?
Sure. So just to give you a comparison here, I've been asked about this fix maybe 30 or 40 times, and I have enacted it very few.
Exactly.
So before Proposition 19 went into effect, I had 80 different clients ask me, can you help me to avoid this problem? And out of the 80 calls that I took, I only helped 15 clients. So there's a lot of people who ask about property tax, but there's a lot of people who are not prepared to the consequences of the action. Whenever you do some sort of a planning, there's always a side effect. And the side effect might be completely acceptable, but it might not. And so Ellen's point is completely perfect. It is outstanding. What is the right candidate for this? This plan only works if you have 2 or more people that you're transferring property to. So if you have one child and you're going to transfer property to the one child, it won't work. If you have 2 children, you're going to transfer property to the 2 kids, then it'll work. You have 3 children, it'll transfer the property to the 3 children, then it'll work. But you can't give one property entirely to one and one property to another. You must split them. So it has to be a co-ownership situation. That's number 1. Number 2 is that when you make a gift, the side effect is that you don't own that gift, that property at the time that you die. And so a person that's a good candidate for this is going to be someone who says, my child does not need something called a stepped-up basis. Now, I know that Ellen had another video. I watch her videos quite a bit. She has another video with something called capital gain tax. And so what I want to describe is something called a stepped-up basis, which is described in that video. But very briefly here, if you own something when you die, when you pass away, the purchase price, what you bought that property at, it's called the cost basis. The purchase price rises to fair market value. If you have to pay taxes, estate taxes on that, then you pay estate taxes. But the IRS makes a deal with you. They say if you have to pay estate taxes, you pay estate taxes. But even if you don't, whether you do or you don't, we're going to forgive all past capital gain. So any future capital gain, if you sell, you still have to pay that. But the past capital gain is forgiven. And that's going to be really important here when we talk about the actual method of transfer and the side effect.
Right, because the moral of the story for that is it's good to die while you own stuff, right? And what we're talking about is dying not owning stuff.
Yeah, it's
capital gains tax purposes.
It's not necessarily good to die.
Right.
But
if
the
you gotta
side
die,
effect
which everybody dies, you might as well own the stuff and get the capital gains step up, right?
Outstanding. That's right. And so Ellen and I both talk about this all the time to clients. We go over cost basis step up and capital gain tax. And I'm going to talk about one more thing called depreciation. So the last piece of the puzzle here that we have to talk about before we talk about this weird method to transfer property between parents and 2 or more children is called depreciation. When you rent a home, if you own a house and you offer it as a rental, there is a schedule at which that property will devalue over time. Not the actual value, but the cost basis. So if you sell, you have to pay capital gain tax. There is a side effect of renting property. And the side effect is that you slowly lower the cost basis over time. But every time you lower the cost basis a small amount, you get to not pay income tax on the rent that you collect. You deduct it. It's called a depreciation deduction. And so if I have a rental home, which is worth $1 million, and I rent it, I will devalue the cost basis of that $1 million house very slowly over the course of about 27 or 28 years, evenly about 3.4 or 3.5% per year. So every year I receive a $35,000 depreciation deduction against that property. If I then give that property to my children with a basis of 0, they get no depreciation deduction, meaning that they pay a higher amount of income tax than any other rental property owner. And so the reason why I'm saying that is that sometimes if you're looking at making a gift, the recipient doesn't get the stepped up basis that happened at your death. but they might be able to avoid paying higher property taxes. So you might have to compare. This is not a one-size-fits-all thing. This is one solution and a whole toolbox of options. So if you're talking to Ellen, or you're talking to me, or you're talking to a CPA or a different planner, you want to make sure that this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. There is no one-size-fits-all thing when we're talking about personal finance, we're talking about taxes, and we're talking about estate planning. This is simply one tool, might fit, might not.
Okay, so we got the drum roll. All right, Elijah.
Okay, so
what is this planning?
We're going to use something called an LLC. An LLC is a limited liability company. It's a halfway between a partnership and a corporation, if you know those two words. But an LLC just means that you're going to create a company with the state of California if you own California real estate. Now, this plan only works in California because this is California specific, but you create an LLC. And let's give the example of parents and children. We have two parents. We have dad, who's Danny, and we have mom, who's Martha, and we have two kids, son, who's Samuel, and daughter, who's Debbie. So the parents put their home into an LLC. The parents don't need to live there anymore. They don't need the house anymore. They're moving. So they're going to give the house away. They put the property into an LLC. Now, there's this weird transaction rule with LLCs that says that you can gift up to 50% of the value of an LLC without causing a property tax reassessment. It's a weird thing that if mom and dad were to take their house and give half of it to Samuel, the son, that they would cause a property tax reassessment in 50% of the house. But if they create the LLC and they give 50% of that LLC to Samuel, now they've only given 50%. So that doesn't cause a property tax reassessment. Then mom and dad take that property out and Samuel takes the property out of the LLC. Now it's owned 50-50, mom and dad. There's been no change. Fantastic. Step number 2, we wait 3 years. We just play the Jeopardy song in the background and we sit there and we wait for 3 years. Why do we wait for 3 years? We need the assessor's office to forget what we did. The assessor's office will not remember what we did 3 years later, or they will not be able to say that this was one singular transaction 3 years later. We have to wait for a number of years. Some people say 1, some people say 2, some people say 5. I say 3, 4, 5. Step number 2. Mom and dad and Samuel create LLC number 2, not LLC number 1, LLC number 2. Samuel puts his half of the property in his half, and mom and dad put their half of the property in their half. Now we have a new LLC. We have new owners. We can transfer 50% of the LLC again. Mom and dad transfer their 50% of the LLC to Debbie. Now Debbie and Samuel remove the property from the LLC. Samuel owns 50%, Debbie owns 50%. If we avoid the step transaction doctrine, then we avoid the transaction. We avoid the property tax reassessment. That is a long story. Takes 3 years. Takes 2 LLCs. Probable fee is probably going to be more than $20,000. It is not cheap to do this transaction. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Most importantly, it's risky. The reason why it's risky is because we're relying upon the government institutions to do things the same way, in the same time, in the same method repeatedly. And a manager might say, do something different, right? The manager at any job, if you have a job and your boss says, hey, we're going to do this a different way, the side effect of doing it the different way is that has an ending, that has a different result on some of your work. And at the assessor's office, the person that we're trying to trick here, or I don't know if we'd say trick, the person who we're trying to utilize this exception to go past their review is called the change of ownership desk. And if the change of ownership desk changes their procedures to look back and view the transaction more than 3 years back, then they are going to trigger this for a reassessment. You might win. You might win the reassessment battle, but the county doesn't care if you win or lose. The county cares that they challenge it, because if they challenge it, then someone else is less likely to take the same action. So the best course of action here is to only take this sort of action if you really are willing to take the risk that it might be challenged in the future, because although this works routinely and it works very well in some jurisdictions, one change by one assessor's office means that now you're suing in court, and court is, you can win. It's much better.
You don't want to go to court. We don't want to go to court. The other thing that occurs to me, Elijah, is you really have to make sure that the kids really want the property. I mean, what if you do all of this and then the kids sell it in 3 years? I mean, what a waste, right? So I guess checking in with your kids to see, hey, is this really what you want? Because I have so many parents who they want to hold on to the house. They think the kids are going to love the house. Then the parents die and the kids are like, heck no, I don't want to move to Los Altos Hills. I want to be San Francisco or New York or wherever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually an outstanding point, because if parents go through this whole enterprise, they will actually cause their children a lot more pain than benefit, because this really only works if children are going to keep that house for a long time, because property taxes stay low and you really recapture the benefit of that over a long period of time. But capital gain tax has this immediate effect, where if the kids sell the house and they have to pay an extra $200,000 in tax, which in this area is actually not that much comparing to the value of houses that have increased, just the increased value of houses, it's very reasonable that kids could pay an extra $200,000 in capital gain tax, and you have saved them $10,000 a year in property tax. If they're going to keep the house for 3 years, you have actually just cost them $170,000. It might have been better for you to keep that property. So before you even think about this, have a really open, honest conversation with your kids. Do they want to do this? One final thing to talk about, and that is a gift tax. Whenever you give something away, it's a gift tax. You have to pay tax on that gift. The gift and estate tax are combined, and I know that Ellen has done a really good job at this in other videos, but you have to consider this as a consideration. You are going to pay for this gift. If you have a taxable estate, meaning that you have more than maybe about $15 million in the future after 2026, that if you're going to make this gift, that you will either pay for it now by paying gift tax, or you'll pay for it later by paying estate tax. So either way, somebody's going to pay the tax man. So it is a consideration. One thing that I want to say here is I'm having a thought that setting up an LLC is not a unilaterally difficult task, right? An LLC is 3 or 4 pieces of paper that are filed with the state and kept privately. But the thing that happens here is that the LLC is a tool and it's a method. Okay, so whenever you have an LLC, it's not how the LLC is created, it's the way that the LLC is utilized. And so if someone wants to try to take this on themselves, they're going to make a bunch of mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes the first time they do something. But this is a one-trick pony. If you go forward and take this step yourself, and you totally can, anybody can do anything themselves, everything is figure outable, but you have to learn the mistakes that the novice would make first. And so the one time that you can do this, if you're trying it yourself for the first time, my only recommendation is get some really good advice, because if you try it the first time and you fail, you make one simple little mistake that the assessor's office will never tell you about, then you're going to cause a reassessment, and then you have to pay for it, and then your children have to pay for it, and you have to do it forever.
Taxes, they're immediate and they're huge.
Or use at your own risk.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks so much for joining us, Elijah. This was great information, great warnings as well.
I don't want to scare people. This is completely possible, but you have to find the right person.
We should scare people. This should be a scary thing, because you get one shot at this and you want to do it right. So there are some things out there, do it yourself, but this is not one of them. So
this is not one. This is an exception to an exception, and the exception means that the result must be exceptional. And so you need to choose somebody who's exceptional to do it.
Yeah, like you. So I don't do this planning, but if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, Elijah, how would they do that?
You can reach out on our website.
Okay.
info@keyslawgroup.com, KEYSLAWGRUOUP.com.
Thanks so much, Elijah.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good seeing you.
Hello everyone. If you liked my mom's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you all next time.